What you call reality may just be a subtle reflection of the way you've learned to observe. What if the world around you isn't really what it seems, but merely the vibrational translation of your inner state? Few people realize it, but there is something deeply silent shaping every experience, every emotion, every apparent coincidence. It's not action. It's not effort. It's observation. What you look at, how often you feel it, and with what intention you sustain it. All of that is now shaping the invisible contours of your life. Maybe no one ever told you this, but reality doesn't respond to what you want. It resonates with what you observe, whether you're aware of it or not. And that's where the paradox lies. Because while you're trying to change the world out there, it's the way you see it that needs to be set free. Many people feel exhausted inside, not from lack of strength, but from excess control. They want to align, but they don't realize the first step is not doing. It's observing without resistance. It's recognizing how attached we are to old versions of ourselves, repeating reactions, recreating patterns, expecting a new result without shifting the silent field that governs it all. Today, we're going to walk through that field, a place where presence holds more power than force, where reality is not something to be conquered, but something that emerges from awakened consciousness. This video is not just more content, it's a passage, an invitation to return to the point where it all begins, your gaze. There is something that comes before what you see, before form, before gesture, even before thought. There is a silent field that observes everything, and it is within this field that reality begins to take shape. You may call it consciousness, presence, soul, or simply silence. The name doesn't matter. What matters is sensing that there's a subtle order that precedes everything that appears to be visible. A kind of invisible score that silently conducts the melody of your life. It's not a force you control, but a frequency you attune to. And it's right there that reality starts to respond. In ancient spiritual traditions, this was naturally understood. There was no separation between the outer and the inner world. The shamans, the Eastern masters, the prophets of the desert, they all understood that what manifests on the outside is merely the echo of what vibrates within. The field that organizes life doesn't follow the logic of effort, but the geometry of consciousness. It's not impressed by what you say you want. It reflects with precision what you hold in your vibrational field. Modern quantum science, when it doesn't disconnect from the heart, begins to touch this truth. It speaks of particles that respond to observation, of realities that fold under conscious attention, of entire worlds that collapse into possibility simply because they were perceived. And if that's true on a microscopic level, could it not apply to your daily life as well? The way you look at life alters what life is. The lens of your consciousness is not neutral, it is creative. When you observe with fear, the field contracts. When you observe with presence, it opens. When you judge, it tightens. When you accept, it expands. This is not a metaphor. It's a vibrational mechanic, as if the entire universe were constantly reorganizing your inner atoms to reflect the quality of your perception. Perhaps you've never paused to notice how much your daily reality is directly linked to your state of observation. That conversation that doesn't flow, the unexplained fatigue, the same situation that keeps repeating. All of it may just be the response of a field that is reading, without judgment, what you truly believe. Not what you say, but your deepest vibration. You are not creating reality only through your conscious choices. You are co-creating everything through how you energetically position yourself in relation to the world. And that positioning is not always clear. Often it's inherited, learned, hidden beneath layers of resistance, control, and unconscious patterns. There is a loving intelligence organizing everything, but it doesn't impose, it mirrors, it tunes in. It reflects back with precision the frequency you're emitting, even without realizing it. That's why so many people feel stuck, not because they lack potential, but because they don't realize they're looking at life with tired eyes, filtering the present through old traumas, expecting the new while vibrating like the old. And so, everything seems stagnant, but it's not. It's simply following the subtle flow of your observation. You look at the world expecting rejection, and you see rejection. You observe time with fear, and it speeds up as if to crush you. You look at yourself with doubt, and disconnect from the source that could show you the way. The invisible field is in no rush, but it is precise. It doesn't need to be convinced, it needs to be perceived. When you begin to observe with more neutrality, more compassion, more presence, the field begins to reorganize, not because you asked, but because you changed the frequency of what you emit. Everything changes when you understand this. Reality ceases to be a burden and becomes a mirror, a delicate mirror, one that reflects not your appearance, but your most intimate vibration. So before you try to change what you're experiencing, maybe it's time to change the way you observe. Because it is in that prior silence that everything is written. Imagine a mirror, but not an ordinary one. A mirror that doesn't reflect your physical image, but the frequency you're vibrating at. Every thought, every emotion, every belief you hold, all of it becomes part of that invisible reflection. And it is precisely this mirror that forms your reality. There is no delay. There is no error. Only vibrational coherence between what you emit and what life returns to you. Most people walk through the world believing they're reacting to events, that what they experience is the direct result of circumstances, other people's choices, or time's limitations. But there is something subtler, deeper. What you interpret as life happening is often just the precise response of an energetic field reflecting your internal content. You are not being punished, you are being revealed. Your reality is your field translated into form. That's a hard thing to accept when you're going through pain, loss, stagnation. But what if, even in those moments, the field isn't working against you, but simply trying to show you where your vibration needs to be acknowledged and released? Like a compass pointing inward, not to condemn you, but to remind you that everything begins with how you observe, feel, and sustain. There is an invisible flow between perception and manifestation, something beyond rational control. You don't think, "I want to suffer," but maybe you're observing life through the eyes of someone still trapped in an old pattern. You don't consciously choose repetition, but maybe your lens is programmed to see through unresolved pain, guilt, fear, or rejection, and the field simply responds, without judgment, without punishment, only as an exact echo. This is the great turning point, understanding that what you live is not random. That the external chaos, no matter how challenging it seems, may be a faithful reflection of an inner misalignment that went unseen for a long time. When the garden is dry, there's no use forcing the flowers. You need to touch the root, rehydrate the soil, change the base vibration, and that base is your observation. The way you observe yourself, others, time, your body, money, love. All of that sends signals, signals that become scripts, experiences, repetitions. Your mind writes the script, but it's your vibration that directs the film. And this happens subtly. You think you're just reacting, but you're actually confirming to the field which story is available to manifest. How many times have you felt like you were sabotaging yourself? That everything was almost flowing, and suddenly, the same pattern returns. The same sense of effort, the same loss, the same lack. It's not bad luck. It's vibration. It's the old program repeating because the observer is still the same. You want the new, but you see through the eyes of the past. You hope for the miracle, but vibrate with skepticism. And the field responds, not with punishment, just with fidelity. But this is not a punishment. It's an invitation. A call to realize that the starting point isn't the outer world. It's the internal place from where you observe it. When you change the way you observe, you begin silently rewriting the script of your experience. Not with force, but with presence. Not with control, but with surrender. Life doesn't want to test you. It wants to align with you. But it can only align with the part of you that is willing to observe differently. That doesn't react automatically, but instead welcomes, feels, breathes, and chooses. And here lies the secret. Reality doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to what you are willing to sustain vibrationally. And that sustenance begins with observation. What you call experience is not something that comes from outside. It's the result of the meeting between your internal field and the vibration of the world. The lens through which you look colors everything. What was neutral becomes chaos or healing. What was simple becomes a miracle or a burden. And it all depends on the vibration behind your gaze. That's why real change doesn't begin when something outside of you transforms. It begins when you shift the internal point from which you observe, when you stop seeing with haste, fear, or resistance, and begin to see with awareness. From there, reality is no longer a reaction. It becomes an extension of your new frequency. You are not trapped in reality. You are trapped in how you interpret it. And this prison is so subtle that almost no one realizes they're inside it, because it has no bars, no walls, no lock. It camouflages itself in the way you observe time, others, and yourself. It hides in the conclusions you formed about life, back when you didn't yet have the awareness to question them. This prison carries the scent of old stories, of the phrases you heard when you were little, of the emotions you learned to swallow, of silences that were interpreted as rejection. It's made of attempts to control, of strategies to avoid pain, of internal pacts you made without realizing it, just to survive emotionally. And the most delicate part is that the more you try to break free, the stronger it becomes. Because the prison is not in what happens. It lies in the field of resistance that activates every time you try to change the world without first changing your perception. It's like trying to heal a wound while denying it exists. You want peace, but you observe everything with tension. You want freedom, but you filter everything through fear. You want flow, but you don't trust the silence. And so you repeat, again and again. Not because you fail, but because you're still holding the vibration of someone who feels the need to fight. And the field in its perfection merely mirrors that pattern. There is a weariness that sets in when the soul feels it's living against its own nature. A spiritual exhaustion that doesn't come from lack of effort, but from too much of it. From trying so hard to control, predict, get things right. From wanting to understand with the mind something that can only be felt with the heart. And then, even if you move to a new city, change partners, change jobs, the internal sensation remains the same, as if something always pulls you back to the same place. This is the vibrational prison, the old field, the conditioned reflection, the gaze trained to see the world as a threat, the body addicted to anticipating pain. Have you noticed how easy it is to doubt something good? How sometimes, when everything seems to be flowing, a voice appears saying, "It won't last?" That's not bad luck, that's an old program. The lens of someone who learned to protect themselves by expecting the worst. And as long as that lens is active, the field can't open, because it keeps reading the same frequency. You may want a new reality video, but it only manifests when you sustain it in the silence of your presence. There's no use in wishing with your mind if your body vibrates scarcity. There's no use in affirming abundance if your gestures still carry the weight of fear. The field is honest. It responds to what is real. And what is real is what is being observed and felt right now. That's why liberation doesn't lie in fighting the pattern. It lies in deprogramming the gaze, in releasing the need to predict, in stopping the urge to fix everything. It lies in trusting the invisible intelligence that reorganizes life when you stop resisting it. It's a process of return, of vibrational re-education, of relearning silence. The prison begins to crumble when you allow yourself to observe without judgment, when you no longer try to escape what you feel, when you stop searching outside for a response that can only arise from within. And then, little by little, reality begins to change. Not because the world changed, but because the mirror was cleaned, and what you see now is a different version of yourself. If this message resonated with something inside you, take a deep breath and write in the comments, "I am ready to let go of the old field." This simple gesture of recognizing and declaring already begins to reprogram what you hold. And if you feel this video touched someone you know, share it. Sometimes the key that frees a cycle starts with a new way of seeing. Sometimes the most powerful change doesn't come from a big revelation, but from a silent moment in which something inside you simply understands. As if an old lock gives way effortlessly, as if the whole body realizes all at once that it was never about trying harder, but about allowing differently. That is the turning point, an inner inflection point where the logic of control starts to lose strength, and something subtler, more real, begins to emerge. Trust in the invisible. Not blind trust based on external promises or illusory ideas, but the felt trust that arises the moment you begin to see that everything that holds you back is exactly what you're still trying to hold on to. You spend years looking for the right answer, the right path, the perfect practice, and suddenly you realize that what was missing wasn't technique. It was space. It was presence. It was the silent permission to no longer force anything, because reality doesn't need to be pushed. It blooms when it finds the right vibrational ground. At this point, a different kind of movement begins to arise, one that's not based on effort, but on attunement. You begin to notice that when you let go of the pattern of trying to fix everything, something within you realigns. The mind slows down, the body relaxes, and the field, that same field that once seemed to respond with resistance, begins to open space for the new. The shift doesn't happen when you defeat the pattern. It happens when you stop fighting it, when you embrace what you feel without trying to change it right away, when you observe the old cycle with neutrality and realize you no longer need to react the same way. In that instant, you stop repeating and start rewriting. There is a very ancient intelligence within you, a part that has always known the way, but it doesn't shout, it doesn't impose, it waits. It waits for you to get tired of resisting. It waits for your thinking to slow down enough to hear it. It waits for you to look from a different place, not with the anxious expectation of control, but with the silence of someone who trusts. And when that turning point happens, something shifts. Not on the outside, but within. The same setting, the same routine, the same challenges, but you no longer see them with the same eyes. And that's exactly why they begin to respond differently. Because now you are no longer at war with reality. You are in presence with it. This shift, at its core, is not a destination. It's a return, a remembering, a reunion with the part of you that doesn't need to prove anything, nor defend itself from everything. It's the part that knows how to feel, that knows how to rest, that knows how to observe with wisdom, that knows reality doesn't need to be molded by force, but aligned by vibration. In this new state, you realize that true power was never in doing more. It was in observing better, in silencing the automatic stories, in letting go of the mental narrative that something is always missing. Because when you stop seeing life as a problem to be solved, it begins to reveal itself as a dance to be felt. The key was never locked on the outside. It was inside, in the place where you learned to see the world as a threat. And now, that place begins to transform. Because you no longer want to control time. You want to flow with it. You no longer want to anticipate the worst. You want to feel what is real. And that is only possible when you allow yourself to be whole in the present. This is the new possibility. A way of being where you stop reacting to what happens and begin to co-create what you vibrate. And it all begins with the silent choice to observe from a different place. Not with an anxious mind, but with an awakened soul. Reality then ceases to be a mirror of your fear and becomes an extension of your trust. Not every change needs to be intense. Not every leap has to be dramatic. Sometimes what transforms is precisely that which happens in an almost imperceptible way. Silent, internal, like a tide that shifts without making a fuss but changes the entire shape of the beach. This is the territory of subtle training. You don't need to learn a new technique. You don't need to repeat mantras or force yourself to maintain positive thoughts all the time. True transformation begins when you change the way you position yourself in relation to what you feel. When you stop reacting automatically and start simply observing. It's not passivity, it's presence. An active presence, one that doesn't need to defend itself from everything, nor interpret everything as a threat. It's in that space between stimulus and response that the field begins to reorganize. And this can start with something as simple as sitting in silence for a few moments each day, without expectation, without trying to get anywhere, just allowing your vibration to be revealed. What this silence reveals is the truth of the moment. Sometimes it's discomfort, sometimes it's anxiety, sometimes it's emptiness. But when you allow yourself to feel without judgment, something begins to move, because the field can only be realigned with what is true. And your emotional truth, even if challenging, is always a portal to release. 3 minutes a day. That can be your starting point. 3 minutes to sit in silence and observe yourself as if you were watching the wind touch the leaves. No rush, no goal, just witnessing. And in that witnessing, something begins to dissolve. Urgency, resistance, the automatic pattern. Over time, that small gesture expands. You begin to notice reactions before they swallow you. You begin to feel emotions before they turn into blockages. You begin to observe old thoughts, without necessarily believing them. And that changes everything, because what was unconscious begins to gain light. What was automatic becomes conscious. What was prison becomes choice. This is true training, not to do more, but to feel more deeply, not to master techniques, but to tune your perception. Reality doesn't respond to the amount of effort, it responds to the quality of your presence. When you walk with more awareness, speak with more listening, touch with more consciousness, the field around you begins to respond differently, because it understands the language of vibration. It isn't activated by words, but by intention. And your intention is revealed in small gestures, in the way you wake up, in the way you look, in the way you breathe. You can start now. With each situation that arises, ask yourself, from where am I observing this? Not to get an immediate answer, but to return to the point of presence. To remember that there is always a choice between repeating the old or making space for the new. This kind of practice doesn't bring instant results, but it creates roots. And once those roots are established, it doesn't matter what happens outside. You no longer sway with the wind. You move with awareness. It's not about controlling the world, but about choosing the center from which you live. Subtle training doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for vibrational honesty, that you be whole in what you feel, that you don't rush to escape uncomfortable states, that you don't try to be someone else, but allow yourself to be who you are, with more truth, more listening, more presence. The practice is simple, but not superficial. It requires courage to stay with what is, not to run, not to speed up, not to use spirituality as an escape, but as a mirror. And the more you practice this gaze, the more your reality begins to respond differently, not because you've mastered the field, but because you stopped blocking the flow, because you allowed your inner truth to find space to breathe. And when that happens, life reorganizes itself through resonance. It's not how much you do, it's with how much presence you do it. You've spent your life trying to change reality, trying to achieve, conquer, fix, always starting from the idea that something was wrong, incomplete, out of place. And maybe the greatest paradox lies exactly there. Reality begins to change when you stop trying to change it. It's counterintuitive, because everything you were taught was based on the logic of effort, of overcoming, of constant interference. But what if the deepest change doesn't come from fighting what is, but from aligning with what is already available, but still can't manifest because you keep trying to act from a place of resistance? The key is not in doing more, it's in observing differently. It's in releasing the weight of constant vigilance, the attempt to control every outcome, the urgency to resolve everything in a rush. Because what traps you is not reality. It's the field of internal tension through which you try to manipulate it. You don't need to prove anything to be guided. You don't need to always be right to be worthy of peace. You don't need to achieve an ideal version of yourself to live in flow. What the field responds to is not your performance, it's your vibrational coherence. And that coherence doesn't come from effort. It comes from presence, from a state where what you feel, what you think, and what you observe are integrated. That's why so many people manifest chaos while seeking peace. Because despite their words, they still carry within themselves the seed of urgency, of fear, of doubt. And the field doesn't judge, it just mirrors. Reality is not a reward, it's a reflection not of what you want, but of what you're ready to sustain. That's where understanding deepens. You don't attract what you want, you attract what's compatible with your field. That can hurt at first, but later it becomes liberating, because it gives you back the power you had outsourced to chance, to destiny, to circumstances. And with that power also comes responsibility, to observe with more honesty, to choose with more awareness, to feel with more truth. You can keep seeking answers, or you can begin to become the answer, not with ready-made ideas, but with the aligned vibration of now. Not with expectations about the future, but with the silent surrender to the wisdom of the moment. Because the now is not blocking you. It's trying to teach you to stop running. And when you finally stop, everything begins to move. Not because you forced it, but because you made space. Because you allowed. Because you stopped fighting reality and started listening to it as if it were an extension of your own field. And deep down, that's exactly what it is. Reality is you, projected into form. Every person who crosses your path, every repetition, every silence, everything is telling you something about your inner state. When you recognize this, there are no more enemies, only mirrors, no more guilt, only learning, no more urgency, only rhythm. And this rhythm is not of the mind, it's of the soul. It doesn't accelerate under pressure. It reveals itself when you enter resonance. That's the paradox. The more you let go, the more everything aligns. The less you try to control, the more reality flows. The less you react, the more you transform. Because it's not your force that creates the new. It's your state of consciousness. It's the vibration with which you touch the world. And that vibration can only rise when you stop fighting it. Reality changes when you change the point from which you observe it. And that point is not outside. It's in the silence where everything begins. We've reached the end of our journey. But maybe the true beginning is only just starting within you. Because now, you no longer look at the world the same way. Something in your observation has been touched, refined, resignified. And even in silence, it's already vibrating differently. The reality you live in doesn't depend on force. It is shaped by your presence, by the way you silently sustain the frequency of your choice. You are not alone. There is a loving intelligence guiding each step, and it responds with precision to the vibration you emit. If this video resonated with you, if something was truly touched within you, write in the comments, "I observe with awareness." That way, I'll know you made it here and that this journey, in some way, reverberated in your field. We move forward together, awakening, one gaze at a time.